Night had settled over Whitehall like a shawl drawn close around old bones. The corridors, vast and echoing by day, now breathed in whispers. The soft sigh of tapestries moving in draughts, the muted drip of wax upon silver plates. And in her chamber, Elizabeth sat alone beneath the dim flame of one candle, its light trembling against the golden embroidery of her gown, the jewels dimmed to a kind of melancholy glow. She had dismissed her ladies hours ago. Even the musicians had ceased their gentle plucking of strings. Only the clock on the mantel dared to make sound, that steady, sovereign rhythm, unbending as time itself. Each tick reminded her that another hour had passed in a life that had once belonged to her alone and now belonged to a nation, to a God she questioned in silence, and to a history that would not forgive. The candle flame swayed when she breathed. Its movement cast faint shadows upon the walls, and in one fleeting shape, the outline of another woman's face seemed to appear, a softer profile, a gentler brow. Mary. It was absurd, of course. The dead do not visit the living, at least not by candlelight. And yet, in the solitude that only a monarch knows, where no sound but her own breath filled the air, she often felt Mary's presence, not as guilt nor as terror, but as something older, more sorrowful. A reflection of what might have been had the fates been gentler, had crowns not been thorns. Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, her hands folded like parchment, thin, veined, trembling. Her rings were heavy, her crown unseen but always felt. The candle crackled. She thought of how the world once burned for faith, for names, for prayers said in the wrong tongue, and how she, in her long reign, had learned that peace was sometimes a quieter kind of cruelty. Outside, the Thames murmured against the stone embankment. The night smelt faintly of rain and iron. A lone bell, far, off, tolled the hour. In its echo, Elizabeth imagined the voices of the dead, courtiers, poets, conspirators, perhaps even her own youth, gathering like smoke in the rafters. She wondered if they too spoke of her as Gloriana, or if they whispered other names. Names she could no longer bear to hear aloud. She rose slowly, her silk gown sighing against the floor. On the table before her lay an open letter. The ink faded, the handwriting familiar. It had been written long ago, by a hand that trembled for different reasons. Mary's. The Queen traced a finger over the looping script, not reading, only feeling the grooves pressed into the page, as though the words themselves had weight. They were not the words of a rival now, but of a woman who had known loneliness, who had once believed God still listened. "Forgive me," Elizabeth murmured, though to whom even she could not tell. To Mary, perhaps. To England. To herself. A draught crept through the chamber. The flame bent low. Outside, the rain began to fall in slow, deliberate drops, the kind that sounded like footsteps fading down a long hall. Elizabeth closed her eyes and listened, her breath slowing to match the rhythm of the storm. And in that quiet surrender, the Queen became, for a moment, only a woman again. One who remembered, one who waited, one who prayed that history might be kind. A long pause. The candle sputters. The sound of distant thunder rolls through the palace. Morning came slowly, as if hesitant, spilling pale light across the carpets. The rain had washed the roofs, leaving the air bright and clean. Within the chamber, coals slept quietly, their crimson eyes hidden under gray. Elizabeth rose softly, cloth whispering along flagstones warmed by last night's embers. She did not ring for ladies. She preferred solitude's honest, patient company. The hearth exhaled. A faint breath, smelling of cedar, wax, and rain. On the grate rested a curl of ruined parchment, brown at edges. It had lodged behind iron tines, escaping full flame, waiting like memory. She knelt cautiously, careful with skirts, mindful of ash, listening to silence. Silence changed timbre in morning light. Last night's darkness carried other ghosts. Now every sound felt newly born. Footsteps far away, a sparrow tapping, the river breathing beyond the walls. The palace settled, old stone thinking. With gloved fingers she teased loose the wounded scrap, thin as moth wing. Its edges flaked, whispering like snow, a soft confession falling without weight. Letters bled faintly, iron gall faded but still alive, still stubbornly present. Not her own hand, she knew. That flatter curve, that patient loop. Mary's old script, remembered by touch, felt in winter when candles trembled. She did not rush to read. Reading is breathing done very slowly. She brushed soot from the strokes, angling for light, for mercy's angle. Words emerged gently, like islands rising through morning mist, wet and glistening. "Cousin," it began, simple and grave, a bell note without adornment, clear. No accusation here, no sharpened doctrine, only the ache of being seen. The rest wavered, half-eaten by fire, shy of daylight, reluctant to speak. Elizabeth felt time tilt on hinges, as doors opened to storerooms kept. How many letters has a life mislaid in embers, entrusted to forgetting? Maybe you felt this too, paper breathing, asking to stay, asking to mean. She placed it on the table, smoothed it gently as one comforts. Ash dust brightened, cape of gray, the margins silvered by morning sun. Somewhere, a page turned in chapel, a sacrist bell kissed open air. Outside the window, trees combed light, leaf to leaf, hair over shoulder. Memory returned cautiously, like a deer tiptoeing the edge of a meadow. Mary in velvet dreamed not seen, a figure carried in mirror's depth. Not rivalry now, not court's performance, only two women bound by crowns. And crowns are riddles disguised as halos, Elizabeth knew, bright, circling, weighty. She read further, slower than prayer, because each line deserved a silence. "Mercy," the letter breathed between cracks, not as demand, more like weather. "Mercy is rain," Elizabeth thought quietly, "arriving in drought, not asking names." Her pulse softened, keeping measured company with mantel clock, faithful wooden heartbeat. She remembered winter journeys in council, cloaks gilded with frost and counsel, how hands warmed over braziers, waiting, how no decision was purely hers. Power is crowded, even in solitude. Many whispers move behind each breath. She lifted parchment, held it nearer, eyes narrowing gently against drifting motes. A small phrase survived the scorch. "Forgive the world," then crumbled, gone. She did not scrape the table. Let the ash stay like snow. There is learning in what breaks. There is teaching in what fades. She remembered Mary's voice from reports, never truly heard, only carried, folded. How strange it is to know a person mostly as echo, rumor. She closed eyes, and the chamber filled with organ murmur from chapel, low like sea against a wall, tide of sound leaving and returning. Within that music, she pictured fields, wet green Scotland, low clouds thinking. She pictured France, orchards sun-sweet, Mary a girl learning the language. She pictured herself, child of tremors, seeking a corner where silence survived. Two lives braided by distant decisions, by hands elsewhere, by pages elsewhere. The candle beside the morning light wavered a little, then steadied itself. "Steady," she murmured, almost to wax, as one might comfort a creature. A knock came, soft, respectful, waiting. She did not answer at once. She let the quiet finish its sentence, the room breathing once more deeply. "Majesty," a voice at last ventured, low as linen. "Shall I enter?" Later, she said, barely above breath. The floorboards listened, then agreed, hushed. She returned thoughts to the letter which had endured heat and years. Perhaps a chamberlain swept the grate too gently once. Wedded to fiber. She traced that, as if touching a scar's rim, remembering old ache. Then, gathering courage, she read fragments, letting the gaps speak with them. Cousin. The times. Turn like wheels. I keep tucked. A psalm learned. Words faltered, broke, rejoined in breath, resembling waves stepping onto a shore. Not for triumph, nor for victory, only for peace. Before the night. Elizabeth paused, listening. The organ softened. Doves arranged themselves on a wet stone. Maybe you've listened this way before, hearing the unsaid say the most. She sat long, back unguarded, unthroned, hands lightly clasped, eyes resting closed. When she opened, the light had moved a little, longer on table. Dust performed ballets, slow, dignified, weightless, the choreography taught by patient son. She remembered someone, a Tudor's counsel, saying that mercy is justice's breath. Justice stands upright. Mercy kneels down. Justice speaks clearly. Mercy speaks softly. She did not declare conclusions there. The story preferred longer corridors, slower. Instead, she folded the letter's remains, not sealing them, only sheltering edges. She placed them in a box, lacquered, dark, humming with faint cedar. Inside were tokens, a ring case, a pressed sprig, an ivory bookmark. She rested the parchment among these, as if bedding. A bird carefully. No monument here, no heraldry bright, only a small nest for memory. Outside, the river sent a laugh, little silver noises against its banks. The sun climbed another quiet inch, clothed in gauze, gentle and mindful. Elizabeth breathed slowly, counting without counting, letting the room teach calm again. She rose finally, not for pomp, only for movement, limbs to wake. The gown answered, hushed and listening, a tide sliding over round stones. She crossed slowly to the window, looked on gardens, wet and simple. A gardener stooped, reset a stake, pressed soil close, then smoothed it. Care is ordinary, she thought quietly. That is majesty. Hands arranging earth. She turned back, faced the hearth, and thanked it for its lesson. Ash teaches patience, fire teaches passage. Together they write honest, tender margins. The scrap remained, safe in cedar, carrying its half-prayer into the afternoon. She touched the box once more, then let go. Palms open. Empty. Forgive the world. The missing words still seemed breathing, close and near. Forgive the world, the organ echoed, though it played something else entirely. Forgive the world, the river offered, folding its silver over silted memories. Maybe forgiveness happens like this, quietly, inward, a door unlatching without any witness. She drew curtains halfway together, thoughtful, leaving a seam for tempered light. A seam is all some days need to widen into understanding's meadow. She sat again, took up quill, tested its point against unused paper. She did not write pronouncements now. She wrote listening, a practice letter. Cousin, she wrote, letting the word rest there first, like a pilgrim. Then nothing else. Silence the ink, margin the meaning, rest the answer. She sanded gently, not to dry, but to bless the unwritten page. The clock breathed, patient and wooden. The palace breathed, stone and story. Elizabeth breathed too, quiet, measured, merciful, as if teaching herself to kneel. The ash cooled, holding no spite, only the memory of having burned. Morning leaned onward, a considerate guest, gathering its shawl, leaving warmth behind. The chamber brightened, then steadied softly, like a candle finding its center. Elizabeth rose slowly, peacefully, without haste, and let silence close its book. She touched cedar once, as benediction, then opened doors, welcoming Light's servants. In their footsteps, no grand trumpet, only the gentle grammar of service. The letter slept safely among keepsakes, its gaps speaking, its fragments whole. And the Queen, lighter by listening, crossed the threshold, carrying a hush. The hearth settled, content with teaching, soft as wool, warm as breath. The river turned, polishing its silver, thinking of seas, speaking of patience. The organ faded, leaving the air simple and forgiving like folded linen. Day took root without declaration, pure, and memory waited, kind as weather. Thus the letter, rescued from ashes, rescued her also. Not to command, but to remind. Mercy is listening, and listening is another kind prayer. The room agreed, walls easing inward, window easing outward, light untying knots. All was still, not empty, filled, with small meanings, with ordinary grace. And somewhere far, in forgotten corridors, a maid paused, heard nothing loud, only the feeling of being safe, as morning folded its soft wings. The Queen smiled barely like weather and let time continue its walk. She did nothing more or less, only kept company with breathing hours. When doors closed, it was quiet, a gentle sentence ending with kindness. The letter slept, and she breathed, and day carried them both forward. So the ashes held their wisdom, and the light held its vow. The world turned, slow, obedient, listening, and mercy lingered, warmed like bread. The chapter ended, not with thunder, but with soft footsteps of acceptance. The candle waited, patient for evening, and the river kept faithful counsel. Thus in quiet, Elizabeth learned again how tenderness rules, without needing victory. And morning passed, like careful handwriting, over a page willing to forgive. The afternoon leaned toward a gentle gold, quietly crossing the palace thresholds. Servants stepped softly, conversations folded thin, like letters tucked behind familiar seals. Elizabeth sought chapel, not for spectacle, only for shelter, hushed as linen. Steps remembered patterns, corridor after corridor, stone teaching patience, air teaching reverence. A tapestry breathed as she passed, wool shifting slightly, sea in miniature. She did not summon musicians now, the heart owns its own instrument. Door hinges sighed, kind as elders, and the chapel welcomed her inward. Candles knelt low, flickers like moths, unafraid of shadow, friendly with silence. Stained glass rested, color asleep, listening, waiting for evening to wake its tender lanterns again. For now, light was parchment pale, merciful, a balm of uncomplicated surrendering brightness. Her footsteps paused on worn flags where generations knelt, left soft hollows. History is weight, and it is also a pillow if held gently. She sat slowly, choosing a pew, hands on wood, smooth like water. The organ loomed quiet and patient, like a whale resting beneath waves. Somewhere a verger folded his thoughts, moving like mist, tending to wicks. She heard breathing, her own first, then the room's slow, companionable cadence. A long chord rose without hands, not music yet, merely the air discovering its throat. Echoes answered softly, climbing the ribs, timbers like lungs, ceiling like sky. Elizabeth closed eyes, letting the resonance brush her temples, comb stray worries. The letters ash still lived inside, nesting where prayer turns into listening. She did not force conclusions here. She laid questions upon the wood as sailors lay ropes in spirals, knowing that order is a mercy. Maybe you felt this too, how sanctuaries teach us slower. Grammar for thought. Words lose edges, become gentle stones, warm from pockets, turned by thumb. She remembered childhood, those narrow winters, books like hearths, corners like cloisters. Then Mary's shadow, not a threat, only a presence, stood by aisle. Not to frighten, only to witness, as if saying, "Share the silence." Elizabeth did not turn her head. She let memory sit beside her. The organ breathed, this time truly, a low prayer, unadorned and steadfast. Pipes carried weather, salt of centuries, dust of hymns, dew of tears. Notes unfurled slowly, cloth across altar, widening like river, then settling calm. A choir boy's footstep clicked and paused, hesitant, respectful, learning the chapel's pace. His whisper drifted, paper thin, harmless, a bird practicing flight without leaving. Elizabeth's fingers traced the pew's grain, small ridges telling quiet carpenter's stories. Craft is prayer, she thought gently. Hands make hallelujahs out of wood. Her pulse matched the unhurried measure, time consenting, smiling, setting down armor. Above, a window held a king, glass-crowned, book opened, gaze toward mercy. Light gathered there, not to boast, only to cradle a page forever. She breathed deeper, filling her ribs, letting the air find hidden rooms. In one chamber she kept dread, in another, tenderness, in another, patience. The music knew, visited them all, lingered without judgment, left warmth behind. A memory rose, a council chamber, winter lantern dimness, papers like snow, voices careful, weighty, frost on syllables, words exchanging burden, never quite resting, and always merry, as idea, presence, question with pulse, name with weather. In chapel now, that weather softened, became steady rain, washing the edges. Elizabeth whispered once, barely a breeze, not a sentence, only a vowel. It carried upward, hung with dust, wove with smoke, and disappeared kindly. She thought of the letter's phrase, "Forgive the world," and let it ring without argument, like brass letting its tone settle, no hand forcing. An old woman entered and knelt, shawl tucked firm, baskets by feet. Her prayer looked like folded shoulders, like garden earth, after gentle rain. Elizabeth watched, learning unwritten liturgies, gestures of quiet lives, well-practiced mercies. A boy coughed, then stopped quickly, afraid of breaking that soft architecture. The verger bowed, checked a candle, tilted the wick, spared its smoke. Small acts rule, she thought again, more than edicts. Corner after corner, 1,000 corners, tended and forgiven, keep a kingdom steady and breathable. Weighted by insight, she did not feel heavier now, she felt held. The choir arrived, scarlet and white, whispers like leaves, hands like doves. They began softly, a psalm known, shared by centuries, no owner's claim. Out of depths, rose like mist, then laid down along the aisles. Depths are generous. They return echoes, but give back wiser than received. Elizabeth listened, motionless, except for breath, which learned harmony without making sound. The pew's polish kept lantern reflections, tiny planets circling, courtesy of oil. A moth wandered, kissed one flame, reconsidered, moved on, chastened yet free. From the transept a draught wandered, polite as prayer, cool on wrist. That coolness said, "Remember your living, which is humble, borrowed, and brief." She nodded inward, a bow none could measure, quiet as a seam. Mary's presence faded not in dismissal, but as incense, sent without smoke. Even absence offers its own guidance. The map left when footsteps end. After the psalm, the organ lingered, letting the notes fold into rafters. The final chord found a niche, nested by carvings, slumbered like bread. No applause here, only consented silence, a congregation of unspeaking companions. Elizabeth remained seated, body remembering crowns, soul remembering fields, hand remembering ash. She thought gently with no verdicts, only slow arrangements, like laying cloth. Perhaps governance is more like weaving than like forging. Threads, not hammers. Warp is law, weft is mercy, loom is time, pattern is people. She imagined Mary as a thread, deep crimson strand, worn but luminous. She imagined herself not brightest gold, but quieter flax, stubborn and serviceable. Together they crossed, over and under, binding a fabric neither fully designed. The image softened, as images do when they become part of breathing. A page turned, windless yet soundful, from a lectern without a reader. That small rustle was its sermon, and she heard every syllable willingly. The old woman rose and left, baskets balancing hope, footfalls blessing stone. Elizabeth remained, receiving the echo's afterthoughts, noticing how peace arrives without trumpet. She remembered faces lost to plague, to debate's heat, to winter voyages. Their names gathered, not to accuse, but to be counted and cherished. She let tears stay where formed, a cool rim across lower lids, not spectacles rain, just dew acknowledging dawn's complicated mercy, dusk's completed promise. Majesty, a whisper, the verger courteous, not intruding, simply protecting her solitude. Remain, she breathed, barely a leaf, and the chapel took that answer. Time loosened knots, one by one, as if laces at tired boots. When finally quiet had spoken fully, she rose slowly, hands along pew. Knees remembered floors, mind remembered fields, heart remembered river, page remembered ash. She bowed lightly toward the altar, not to appease, but to align. Alignment is mercy, bones and thoughts, policy and tenderness brought into conversation. A draft lifted her sleeve hem, kissed her wrist, blessed her pulse. As she turned, stained glass stirred, a lone pane letting in gold. Color stepped down, walked on stone, sat by door, waited like friend. Elizabeth passed through, and color followed, resting on shoulder, quiet as shawl. The door sighed, thankful to serve, and the corridor received her footsteps. Behind her, music stayed in wood, stored like wine, aged, unhurried, generous. Ahead, the palace resumed its tasks, quills and candles, ledgers and kindness. She carried chapel, not as badge, but as fragrance, clean and humble. Mary's shadow walked a step behind, no longer heavy, almost companionable weather. They crossed together, queen and echo, toward the world's next small mercy. By a window, light moved stones, measured the day, blessed the ordinary. Elizabeth paused once, hand on sill. She stood still, let echoes settle. Mary's shadow stayed, measured and merciful, not as threat, as a careful witness. Come, she whispered, to air alone, to her courage, to this day. Hands at rest, eyes without hardening, she pressed forward, soft as prayer. The council chamber received her calmly, papers stacked square, ink alive, listening. But the chapel remained within her, a pocket garden, under her ribs. Every quill scratch tapped its rhythm, meted by psalm, guided by patience. So conversation began, low, civil, thorough, stones never thrown, voices never raised, and though dilemmas arranged themselves stoutly, she kept hearing the small refrain, like water nearby, like wind kindly, like mercy kneeling, forgive the world. By evening's edge, she would return, perhaps to chapel, perhaps to cedar. Either way, listening would meet her, unafraid of power, willing to guide. She held that quiet as scepter, held it gently, never too tight. Then with grace, as daylight folded, she took seat, and history breathed. The echo thinned, yet did not depart her chambers. It learned residence. Thus the queen, wearied yet steadied, entered discourse slowly with the chapel's cadence. And the day in courteous sandals walked beside Mercy and did no harm. The afternoon lengthened and corridors warmed, the air carrying linen and quiet ink. Sun leaned sideways, gold in panes, folded between threads, burnishing the past. Elizabeth walked alone, without escort near, seeking corridors unused, the ones forgotten. The walls watched her, hung with stories, tapestries aged and sighing, their threads fading. Knights rode forever, hunters pursued stitch stags. Maidens waited still, under stitched trees. Each panel rippled slightly with drafts, a slow curtain breath, ancient and faithful. She paused often, fingertips tracing texture, wool and silk, dust like memory. In certain light the colors spoke, in tones subdued, earth and ember. She heard something, a fabric sound, not quite movement, not quite wind. Perhaps a mouse, perhaps a ghost, perhaps time unfolding, its small pages. Strange, she thought, how walls remember? Each thread seemed to whisper names softly. Maybe you've heard old rooms breathe, their plaster listening still, their timbers thinking. Elizabeth leaned closer, heard a faint pattern, a needle's rhythm, half a century old. She imagined women bent to frames, their laughter woven beside their tears. She saw Mary, in thread perhaps, stitched in shadows, hidden in vine. A face outlined by faded green, a crown suggested, a gesture stilled. Could servants have smuggled her likeness, a secret sympathy inside royal walls? Elizabeth did not resent the idea. She almost smiled, grateful for memory. Forgiveness works quietly, she reminded herself, like needlework, back and forth. She stepped again, her train soft, her shadow longer, her mind open. Tapestries shifted as she passed, each breath a flame of fabric. Through an archway, a courtyard gleamed, autumn gilding hedges, doves perched thoughtful. She stood within doorway's shade, felt air change, cool and honest. Inside, the threads spoke again, not to haunt, but to remind. They told of hands, unrewarded, unrecorded, making beauty daily, expecting nothing. She touched the border, felt a loose stitch, caught between centuries, waiting repair. Her nail nudged it, then left it, deciding not to finish what time began. Imperfection is honest, she thought gently. It lets truth breathe. From the upper hall, voices drifted, clerks in discussion, ink and paper. They sounded distant, from another world, while she stood inside thread's breath. She remembered childhood stories of saints, torn and mended, patched by grace. Mary's name slipped through her mind like a needle, entering light, exiting shadow. Not enemy, not idol, simply woman, mirror. Another pattern woven. The wind lifted, a window sighed, a corner flapped softly. Confessional gesture. Elizabeth whispered, half to herself, "Rest now, threads, you have served." The hall listened, floorboards answered mildly, and the air settled. She walked onward, past more histories, each wall a page unfurling. The last tapestry showed a harvest. Figures bowed low, hands full of grain. She stopped there, studying posture, finding grace in simple reaping. "So must I," she murmured softly. "Gather what's left." Outside, the light tipped toward amber, and bells signaled vesper preparations. She turned slowly, felt the fabrics behind her breathe, closing their eyes. Corridor to corridor, her steps carried the smell of wool, the quiet of art. In an alcove, a servant knelt, repairing fringe, needle glinting faithfully. Elizabeth paused, watching, admiring small devotion, the way hands knew without words. "Good afternoon, Majesty," the woman murmured, head still bowed. Elizabeth nodded gently. "Continue," she whispered, voice like linen folded after use, and moved along. The servant smiled, not seeing her, but feeling blessing pass like warmth. Up ahead, a window opened slightly. Wind unrolled music from distant gardens. A lute's practice, a fountain's answer, two voices meeting without argument. Elizabeth paused again, looked back once, saw light catch in tapestry threads. Each spark seemed to wink alive, like candles consenting to their own end. She bowed her head, not in weariness, but in reverence for hands unseen. The whispers faded, folded into fabric, resting as stories always must. The hall grew still, holding its breath, while Elizabeth passed like a memory. At its end, a door waited, half open, half shadow. She stood there, letting light decide which side to claim her for. Beyond lay evening, below the gardens where roses leaned toward last sun. Behind, the tapestries kept their whispers, faithful and tired, content with silence. She stepped forward, slowly, peacefully, carrying their lessons in her breath. Needle and throne, thread and rule, forgiveness and fabric. All one pattern. The door closed softly as cloth returns to its fold and the castle sighed in sleep. The north gallery waited in hush, windows rinsed pale, panes holding breath. Afternoon light gathered like obedient doves, settled on boards, kissed blank canvases. Dust moved slowly, polite and weightless, trained by centuries to disturb nothing. Elizabeth entered quietly, shadows walking first, then the queen, then her silence. The painter bowed, not very low, respect within economy, reverence without spectacle. He smelled faintly of walnut oil, chalk, and vellum, freshly planed wood. His hands trembled just at edges, not of fear, more of listening. A stool waited, dignified and spare, cushion like cloud, color of oatmeal. He motioned softly, open palm speaking. Here, if comfortable, but words withheld. She inclined head, took the seat, felt joints murmur, clothes answer softly. Windows looked north, toward patient sky, toward fields hidden, toward river thought. The room contained portable daylight, bottled, in bowls silvered, in mirrors leaning. A panel primed, milk-white and tender, stood like dawn, awaiting first bird. The painter breathed, counted his tools, good companions, faithful as prayer beads. He lifted chalk, described the air, found lines hovering, mapped what waited. Elizabeth kept still, still as scripture, still as linen folded for vespers. Her face rested, neither mask nor confession, only listening, like a harbor. He studied angles, brow to cheek, jaw to ear, light to thought. Light reported truth, truth reported mercy, mercy reported distance, distance opened room. Maybe you've sat like this once, held by looking, sheltered by quiet. A sparrow clicked beyond the glass, little metronome heart, unaware of history. The painter's breath matched its counting, not rushing time, not pinning minutes. He marked softly, a ghostly oval, hint of crown, hint of weather. Elizabeth did not consider her power. She considered posture, how bones listen. Mary's shadow came, as it does, not to darken, but to shade. Shading helps painters, shading helps hearts, gives the highlights something to answer. The chalk traveled, chin to collar, pearls suggested lightly, like snowfall whispering. He paused, bowing, eyes not dropping, simply acknowledging presence like approaching altar. She thought of cedar box sleeping, letter among keepsakes, ash quieting pride. He thought of his own debts, old January dinners, Cold tools warmed. Two solitudes met, not colliding, gathering, like rivers joining in fog gentleness. He began paint, eggs small sun, ground pigments praying, honeyed binder sighing. Colors woke slow, earthborn, sky remembering, patient as monks, obedient to silence. He built shadows, thin as breath. Then he waited, let boards drink. Elizabeth watched hands, sincere and steady, blessing each gesture, refusing to hurry. The mirrors listened, showed her twice, once in presence, once in wondering. She remembered chapel, morning's soft psalm, forgive the world, threaded through ribs. She remembered tapestries, hands that stitched, whispers in wool, mercy in errors. The painter stepped 2 paces back, examined suggestion, paused, stepped forward again. He added sparkle, not blazing brightness, rather answered light, quiet, deliberate pearl. Her throat lengthened in that pearl, years unfastened gently like sleeves unmended. He asked nothing, not even stories, only requested stillness, which she offered. From the window, river flashed once, metallic and shy, then hid again. Hold, if possible, he murmured finally, voice like linen laid over wound. She held, yes, held without violence, held the years, held the names. Mary's outline drifted behind the paint, not to claim, only to witness. He mixed grays, not sorrow's grays, weather's wiser grays, lantern at dusk. Gray made room for other tones, for rose breathing, for gold forgivable. He feathered eyelids not to flatter, to dignify wakefulness, the cost of thrones. Elizabeth's thoughts turned toward far counties, toward worn bridges, toward cottage hearths. If portraits travel, let them carry not terror's bite, but patient kindness. Let me be a quiet roomer, she thought inward, of listening governance. He placed glazes, like summer rain, thin, returning, cumulative, teaching wood patience. The room smelled of egg memory, wine of pigment, old oak beams. A page entered, tiptoed invisible, set fresh water, left with deference. Footsteps were commas, not loud periods, allowing the sentence to breathe onward. Elizabeth's neck eased, finding true balance, no straining upward, no falling inward. He caught that, the honest poise, and blessed it with tender ochre. Sometimes truth wears very little color, he thought quietly, mixing pale breath. He painted hands, islands of intention, veins like rivers, rings like townships. Not hard rings, not sharp declarations, merely inhabited circles kept for meaning. Her fingers relaxed, confessing without words that heavy scepters rest between hours. He warmed knuckles, cooling the pearls, brought both into a courteous conversation. Outside, a bell counted the distance. Afternoon's long shawl dragging across roofs. The painter listened, translated the bell into slower strokes, wider and gentler. Elizabeth remembered gardens, the gardener earlier, pressing soil close, crowning small stakes. This is governance, her thought repeated, hands arranging earth, nothing more splendid. He set highlights on the lip, not the smile, the breath's threshold. Breath is throne, he nearly thought, but did not interrupt the quiet. He rimmed iris, held its light, not to pierce, to welcome meeting. Her gaze settled, out beyond canvas, toward open corridors, toward soft decisions. Within the paint, Mary took shelter, as shade does, making peace readable. The painter's sleeve brushed the frame, a hush answered, varnish anticipating years. He lowered brush, checked his distance, met her eyes, asked nothing more. Time thinned mercifully, like tea warmed, like wool brushed, like rain remembered. He touched collar, found small glimmer, a mote singing, left it singing. Not every fleck requires correction. Sometimes, truth prefers specks, stars on cloth. Elizabeth exhaled long, the room matching, beams loosening slightly, windows nodding approval. The painter nodded, toward his panel, toward the Queen, toward the light. "We will stop," he whispered gently. "Let colors settle, like bread rising." She stood slowly, not to depart, but to bless the waiting wood. He bowed once, less ritual now, more friendship formed, without the naming. She moved nearer, regarded her likeness, saw not majesty, saw tempered weather. Years, like isobars, curved across brow, promising clearer days without boasting thunder. Mary's presence hovered, a distant hill, cooling the horizon, giving depth kindly. "Thank you," breathed Elizabeth, barely audible, sound like thread passing through cloth. He replied softly, "Thank you, Majesty." Voice a brush, washing clean water. No further speech. Speech would bruise the tender silence just now woven. She turned away, walked between windows, collecting their light, not to own. Her ladies waited, gentle and quiet, catching her motion, echoing its rhythm. The gallery sighed, boards happy tired, tools grateful resting, shadows reassembling peace. She carried portrait within her chest, a still compass, steadying the corridors. Past tapestries breathing, past cedar memory, past chapel echoes, she moved, measured. Governance awaited downstairs, ink cooling patiently, papers holding breath, counselors arranging sentences. But the paint had clarified weather, and inner isobars fell to calm. The Queen walked as practiced mercy, not brittle verdict, not brass trumpet. You may know this feeling too, when someone sees without taking away. It lingers kindly, teaches your steps, makes your voice choose softer rooms. At stairs' head, she paused once, listened for river, heard distant silver. "Forgive the world," the cadence returned, like brush rinsed, like bell answered. She descended slowly, pearl rhythm gathering, wool rhythm breathing, wood rhythm blessing. Evening approached gently, candles preparing patience, flames learning courtesy, wicks inclined inward. She thought painting was prayer also, pigments confessing earth, light absolving effort. In council later, her words measured, braided with quiet, leaving space merciful. But for now, in North Gallery, the panel rested, unfinished, perfectly begun. Varnish would wait. Portraits prefer waiting, as mercy does, before it shines. The doors closed, polite with age, and the corridor kept careful silence. The painter lingered, eyes on panel, thanked his teachers, thanked hidden hands. He cleaned brushes, slowly, respectfully, thoughtfully, like laying flowers on unnoticed graves. Across the palace, bells braided twilight, her footsteps braided the same patience. Nothing concluded loudly, everything inclined inward. The night prepared its gentler grammar. Thus the Queen, tempered by looking, entered her evening carrying soft weather, and the portrait, gathering its breath, waited with kindness for morning's return. The chamber breathed patience, long table glimmering faintly, maps like sleeping continents, quills standing at attention. Candlelight gathered humbly, not sharp, not proud, a congregation of flames, listening rather than shouting. Elizabeth entered softly, steps like folded parchment, eyes still carrying pigment, the painter's calm air. Counselors rose briefly, bowed without rustle, their robes murmuring ceremony, then resumed waiting posture. Windows shuttered tight, rain threaded darkness outside, a fine drizzle, sounding like old ink. A servant trimmed wick, the flame nodded, grew small again, wise and deliberate. Elizabeth took seat, hands resting quietly, palms like covers of unread books. "Let us begin," she said evenly, her voice a well-balanced instrument. No command thundered, no tension cracked, only reason's pulse, gentle yet certain. Parchments unfurled slowly, ribboned with wax, edges singed slightly, secrets breathing faintly. Reports were read, grain levies, harbors, a border incident, a merchant appeal. Each word weighed, each number tested, each decision deferred until peace spoke. Candle smoke curled, ascended like prayer, wove through rafters, joined with shadows. A young minister, barely more than a scholar yesterday, rose to speak. His tone cautious, his Latin polite, his news somber, his heart visible. "Majesty," he began, "a whisper persists. Beyond our northern holdings, letters crossing channels." Elizabeth listened, unmoved, eyes tracing flame, seeing only warmth, not threat's outline. He mentioned Mary's name, softly, reverently, carefully, as one might. Touch cold marble. The room shifted, subtle as tide. Men exchanging breaths, not glances yet. Elizabeth's fingers folded, the rings gleamed dully, gold absorbing sorrow, not reflecting fear. "You speak rumor," she murmured slowly. "Rumor feeds weather. Weather feeds folly." Her words floated. Neither denial nor confession, just balance, a bridge of tone. The minister bowed, accepted correction gently, retreated to silence, relieved, forgiven, taught. Cecil leaned forward, his shadow long, his eyes practical, his mind arithmetic. "Majesty," he offered, "parchments multiply quickly. We might consider preemption, letters monitored discreetly." Elizabeth nodded faintly, hearing wisdom's voice, but beneath it, another voice softer. "Forgive the world," the whisper returned. From chapel mornings, from ashes remembered. "We will read," she answered calmly, "but not wound. We will wait." Her tone settled, final yet kind. A bell after last service ends. Scribes recorded quietly, pens modest servants. No flourish, no vanity permitted here. The council breathed together like choir between verses, all sensing rhythm, none seeking dominance. Rain increased outside. Windows misted softly, candles shimmered more, like stars awakening. A map spread, Ireland's coastline trembling, ink uneven, bruised, edges still wet. "Ships missing," murmured another counselor, careful. "Fishermen frightened. Famine possible this winter." Elizabeth leaned closer, studied blue stains, finger tracing shorelines, like rosary beads. "Send grain," she said, "not sermon. Bread first." Her words plain, weight carried mercy. Cecil made note, voice almost warm. "Majesty instructs relief. So recorded." Across the table, a clerk's sleeve caught a candle, smoke leapt briefly. He stilled it, fingers quick, humble, a flicker survived, lesson learned quietly. Elizabeth watched flame. How near ruin resembled devotion's brightness, depending on wind. She spoke gently, to no one. "Care is balance." None interrupted her. They knew wisdom when it wore its plain garments. The meeting turned to roads, plague, flooded farmlands, coinage, a bishop's request. All the while she listened deeper, beyond the matters, to tone, to tremor. Voices softened gradually, as though contagion of calm spread, flame to wick. A bell outside, marking 9th hour, rang without arrogance, clear, obedient, tired. Elizabeth closed eyes a moment only, seeing again Mary's ink on parchment. How fragile letters, yet how enduring. They change empires quietly, without drawing swords. "Majesty," asked Cecil, "shall we adjourn?" She opened eyes, steady, untroubled. "One more thing," she said softly. "Bring light closer. We will read." An aide obeyed, moved a candle, flame bowing politely, offering illumination humbly. Elizabeth lifted sheet, fresh from envoy, foreign seal trembling in red wax. She broke it, read slowly, silently, her lips parting without sound. The content plain, a peace proposal, border arrangement, friendship. She breathed once. "Accept," she murmured, eyes on wax. "For now, peace is truest strength." Counselors inclined heads, a page noted, another trimmed candle, dropping wax carefully. Minutes continued peacefully, candle scent sweetened, time itself calmed, like sea subsiding. No decree thundered, no gavel fell, only completion sighed, gentle and human. "Enough tonight," Elizabeth declared kindly. "Let work rest. Let fire speak." Chairs moved softly, robes gathered silence, doors whispered gratitude, servants dimmed sconces. The room's glow reduced to handful, flames bowing farewell, diplomats of light. Elizabeth lingered seated, alone again, palms joined loosely, shoulders relaxed downward. Papers formed hills, each a kingdom, each awaiting sunrise, patient as monks. Outside, thunder muttered, not fierce, thoughtful. A sermon murmured to listening earth. She smiled faintly, remembering painter's calm, the North Gallery's hush, the brush's restraint. Governance, she mused, is another painting, layers of waiting, underpainted in mercy. She rose slowly, the chair creaking, its joints faithful, its years loyal. Candles inclined inward, one last bow, flame touching wick, passing farewell blessing. She touched table, thanked it inwardly for holding burdens without complaint nightly. The doors opened, hallways accepted footsteps, tapestries breathed gently, unraveling day's echo. Past clerks yawning, past guards nodding, past portraits watching, she moved lighter. "Forgive the world," she whispered once, half to walls, half to self. Rain answered kindly, a hymn downward, washing stone patience, cooling ambition's fever. Elizabeth paused mid-corridor, let drops whisper, through shutters thin, their silver counsel. Then she continued, toward private chamber, toward cedar box, toward unfinished prayers. Behind her, candles expired in sequence, each a servant ending day beautifully. The council slept, but its echoes remained in air, like organ notes, and history waited, with quill poised, with ink patient, for dawn's correction. The Queen entered her room quietly, removed one ring, set it aside. The candle burned, its twin remaining, guarding the stillness, blessing her solitude. She sat once, wrote no letter, only listened deeply, as if listening were governance itself, a crown's truest sound. Outside, the rain turned into mist, soft, forgiving, endless. The chamber exhaled, walls memorizing mercy, and time bowed. Thus the night without verdict continued, content to hold what she forgave. Frost had arrived without announcement quietly, a silver handwriting across the kingdom. The Thames stiffened, slowly, thoughtfully, patiently, its breath shortening under glass skin. Morning bells rang, their tones muffled, caught between clouds, hung like memory. Elizabeth stood watching. From high window, hands joined loosely, mind wrapped inward. Smoke rose lazily from distant roofs, blending with fog, making cities dream. The palace roof, hooded with frost, glittered faintly, humbly, like old lace. Somewhere below, servants tested steps, found safe patches, laughed softly, careful. A child's echo, unexpected, honest, brief, carried through court, then vanished tenderly. Elizabeth smiled faintly, a warmth earned, like tea shared in cold hands. The river waited, a mirror uncertain, reflecting both crown and cloud equally. She remembered summers, the barge processions, the flutes, banners, gilded applause. Now there was no procession, no music but breath, no audience but air, and she preferred it. Silence gave truth a place to stand. Mary's presence lingered, still quiet, nearer with each morning, yet kind. unaccusing. Elizabeth whispered inwardly, "Forgive the world," as prayer, habit, and farewell combined. Maybe you've known such mornings too, when air forgives and time exhales. A knock came, careful, respectful, soft, a servant bearing letters and frost. He entered slowly, boots dampened, polite, breath a cloud. "Majesty," he said, "from the tower, and one note from the north." She nodded once, took the pages, set them aside, unhurried, intentional, calm. "Hot water," she murmured, and he bowed, departing gratefully, quietly. Alone again, Elizabeth read first, eyes tracing weight, finding nothing cruel. Reports of markets, grain, and illness, but nothing bitter. She was grateful. The second note, thin and trembling, written by wind, smelt of cold. It spoke of Mary's health fading, of long hours, of steady prayers. The Queen paused, fingers between pages, heart between duties, mind between weathers. Outside, the ice moaned a little, a deep sigh, ancient, uncertain, holy. Servants laughed distant, testing the strength, skates of bone, lanterns swinging mild. Elizabeth imagined them, children of frost, riding circles briefly before melting away. That was life. She turned inward, toward her fire, where coals glowed like slow stars. Flames whispered history in accents wooden, smelling of oak, of candle prayers. She remembered childhood, a hearth smaller, fear larger, hunger more familiar guest. Now warmth abundant, yet loneliness sharper, the cost counted in silence nightly. A small clock ticked, time's steady psalm, measured without pride. Her mind drifted to Fotheringay's chapel, cold stones, breath, beads on table. She wondered softly, did Mary still feel winter's weight? Did she forgive? Such questions stayed like snowflakes mid-air, never landing fully, never quite gone. Elizabeth rose slowly, moved to window, watched men carry wood across river. Their reflections wavered, ghosts on water, fading with ripples, returning with strength. Life persisted quietly, as faith does, small, consistent, unboastful. A gull drifted, then settled near, its eyes calm, its patience priestly. "Come nearer," she said, and it tilted, listening perhaps, then remained still. Outside, marketmen gathered, crying apples, coal, bread, ribbons, gloves. Winter's fair forming, barges moored sideways, tables built gingerly on cautious ice. Elizabeth watched them, felt pride rising, the people enduring without royal urging. That was England's truest miracle. Quiet persistence. A maid entered, placed tea steaming, linen folded neat, eyes lowered kindly. Elizabeth nodded gently, smiled without order, and dismissed softly. She poured herself, steam-veiling face, breath joining vapor, thought joining mercy. "Forgive the world," she repeated once, not for show, for inner balance. Letters waited unread, ink awaiting verdict, but morning refused haste. She took quill, dipped in patience, wrote simple note, plain, unspectacular mercy. "To my cousin, may warmth remain, may hours pass, without bitterness. E." She sanded lightly, sealed without flourish, no crest raised, only quiet wax. Outside, laughter grew, bells and wheels, children's calls echoing through milk air. Music of survival. Elizabeth called it and leaned forward, listening long. The ice answered, groaning, sighing, alive, and she smiled, trusting its wisdom. Snow began falling like pages closing, each flake deliberate, each pause musical. She whispered softly, almost to air. "Winter teaches mercy by slowing blood." A servant entered, hesitant, whispering, "Majesty, Lord Cecil." She nodded once. He arrived quietly, cloak damp, eyes, stern but weary, mindful parchment. He bowed, low, and stood waiting, while candlelight reconsidered his lined face. "The matter presses," he said gently, not cruelly, only as duty does. Elizabeth regarded him, saw old loyalty, saw worry's burden, saw trembling conscience. She gestured chair, and he sat, hands folded, deferent. "Fotheringhay," he murmured, almost apologetic. The word hung, like frost breath. "Yes," she said, eyes on window. "Winter reaches there, same as here." He nodded slowly, understood Tone's mercy, did not push, only waited still. They sat thus, minutes unwinding silently, fire marking time, ice listening outside. Finally she spoke, each word candle-paced. "Let them know. We pray peace." It was not the answer yet, but closer kindness. Cecil bowed deeply, grateful for pause, and withdrew gently, footsteps echoing mercy. Elizabeth stayed still, counting slow breaths, like counting rosary without naming saints. The gull departed, wings slow, soundless, grace drawn upward, frost breaking lightly, her tea cooled, steam surrendered kindly, cup still warm, still patient companion. Afternoon dimmed, sky bruised lilac, river held glow, city hummed prayers. Elizabeth turned inward, toward candles hum, toward cedar box, toward unfinished forgiveness. No trumpet called, no herald declared, yet decision drifted, snowlight, inevitable. She wrote again on smaller paper, "God grant wisdom," folded, unsent. Sometimes messages are meant inward, to find peace before they travel. Outside, the fair grew brighter, braver, torches like constellations upon the ice. Children's shouts mingled, vendors sang low, dogs barked faintly, bells kept rhythm. The Thames breathed, alive despite sleep, and carried stories beneath thin frost. Elizabeth watched long, face lit evenly, neither joy nor grief prevailing fully. Only acceptance remained, the truest kind. She closed curtains, left a gap for light's memory, for mercy's gaze. The candles bent as if agreeing, and the chamber warmed in silence. The frost outside did not break. It waited kindly for dawn's verdict, and the queen, between ink, ice, and lingering faith, waited too, listening. Evening arrived quietly, without herald or hymn, its cloak of shadow softly clasped closed. The palace exhaled, doors breathing warmth, candles bowing lower, their tongues disciplined. Outside, the Thames slept beneath frost, dreaming of spring, dreaming of freedom. Elizabeth sat still beside her fire, hands loosely folded, eyes on nothing. The room held breath, waiting respectfully, cautiously, as though truth might enter any moment. The cedar box rested beside her, its grain glowing, a keeper of burdens. Wind pressed shutters, testing their patience, but failed entry. Loyal guards of wood. A single candle burned nearest window, its flame elongated, thin as whisper. Maybe you've known this kind silence, when every sound becomes a memory. The queen leaned back, neck stiff, weary, the weight unshared but no longer bitter. Her thoughts wandered, slowly, reverently, to chapel echoes, to painted patience, to Mary's letters, to Frost's fairness. Each moment returned like migrating birds, circling before rest. She spoke softly, to herself, to the air's ear. "Tonight feels endless," she murmured mildly, as though dawn has forgotten its cue. Her words floated, hung above logs, flickered like flame, then folded inward. The fire sighed, one ember pulsing, red as heart, small as mercy. Outside, snow drifted in deliberate hymns covering the gardens, quieting all ambition. Each flake landed like benediction given, without bias, universal, without favor, final. She rose slowly, approached the window, touched cold glass, felt its honesty. Below, lanterns moved. Servants crossing courts, their shadows trembling, their laughter softened. A faint bell chimed, far-away tower speaking to night, to God, perhaps. Elizabeth listened long until it faded, leaving behind vibration, not sorrow, blessing. Then came sound, boots on stone, steady, purposeful, near. The door opened without announcement's flourish. Lord Cecil entered, eyes lowered deeply. He held parchment. Sealed, weighted, aged, bearing final ink. "Majesty," he whispered, barely audible, humble. "The council waits." His breath trembled, from both chill and reverence mixed. Elizabeth nodded slowly, accepting the truth already arrived quietly before his mouth. The night was very still then. She took letter, fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, from understanding. Wax cracked faintly, a small thunder, and inside, the words, final and clean. Judgment deferred no longer, lines of law, prayers of policy, signatures like gravestones. Mary's name printed, neither crowned nor cursed, only recorded mortal. Elizabeth read all, every loop measured, every syllable steady, each one heavier. Her lips parted, but she said nothing at first, as Mercy struggled. Cecil waited motionless, face a candle, lit, weary, penitent. "Does it end?" she asked quietly, voice thinner now, but still composed. "It must, Majesty," he replied softly, "for peace remains until this ends." A truth too sharp for comfort, yet too clear to deny entirely. Elizabeth closed eyes, saw Mary's smile, not of rival, of remembered woman. "Forgive the world," her heart recited unconsciously, tenderly, pleading for both. The pen lay on table nearby, innocent, obedient, waiting. She sat down, hands folding prayer, palms damp slightly, skin remembering age. Cecil watched still, breathing through guilt, silent as altar. "Do you fear," she murmured faintly, "that I will curse this signing?" He shook head, tears near edge. "Majesty, I fear your kindness most." That truth reached her, touched crown's weight, melted it briefly. She lifted quill, dipped in ink, watched drop tremble, black and patient. Paper waited open, the candle bent, the fire hushed, even wind paused. Her name unfurled, stroke by stroke, Queen becoming mortal, Mercy becoming law. When finished, silence. The pen returned, its nib dark, its duty fulfilled. Cecil bowed low, eyes wet, grateful, crushed by duty, redeemed by faith. "It is done," he said softly, as tears fell, onto floor quietly. Elizabeth rose slowly, heart breaking gently, soul steady, resolved. "No triumph here," she whispered inward. "Only winter's truth." He bowed again, took the parchment, left the chamber, boots whispering sorrow. The door closed, soundless, respectful, final. Elizabeth stood long, staring at fire, seeing in flame her own history. She whispered prayer. Not rehearsed creed, not for crown, not for forgiveness, simply for rest. The flame answered, leaning toward her, language of warmth, language of mercy. She opened box, held the beads, traced each sphere, remembered each name. "Mary," she breathed, almost invisible sound. "May heaven mend what earth broke." The wind softened, shutters eased sighs, candle flickered once, then steadied faithful. Maybe you've felt that moment too, when wrong and right blur into peace. She knelt there, not queenly posture, not ruler's display, human, weary, sincere. Her tears fell, one, then none, absorbed by carpet, forgiven by fire. Outside, the river cracked and sang, its ice dreaming, under moon's pity. Clouds crossed gently, unwilling to stare, respecting her solitude, her silent verdict. The palace slept, save one window, gold and awake, praying without words. Inside, Elizabeth lingered, palms around beads, heart around mercy, memory around love. Snow drifted thick, erasing footprints' pride, repainting the world in neutral grace. And Mary, somewhere beneath same stars, dreamed of home, of songs unending. Elizabeth rose again, placed beads down, closed the box, bowed her head. The candle burned, its wax leaning, and she whispered, barely audible final, "Forgive the world." The night bowed, the river agreed, and the frost stayed mercifully whole. No triumph thundered, only this silence, the price of peace, paid in mercy. Thus passed England's longest, gentlest night, and the Queen beneath her crown became, for hours, only a soul. Dawn returned gently, as if uncertain, as if apologizing for absence long. The sky blushed faintly, pearl over pewter, a fragile beginning, barely breathing color. Snow covered everything, soft and forgiving, hiding old scars, tempering harsh edges. The Thames lay still, a white ribbon stitched through city, quiet and dignified. From her window, Elizabeth watched frost melt into light, thread by thread. Smoke rose vertical, content with calm, as if heaven finally forgave roofs. Servants whispered downstairs, treading on wool, voices rapped kindly, fingers cupping breath. Candles guttered low, their vigil done, their light rewarded by morning's grace. The Queen remained in chamber's hush, a statue breathing, a thought enduring. Her eyes glimmered, not from tears, but from knowing the night had ended. The parchment gone, carried by dawn, now a sentence, now an echo. She touched table, where pen had scratched the fate, and forgave it. "Forgive the world," she murmured softly, for the final time. Maybe you've spoken those words before, knowing they leave, but never vanish. She rose slowly, her gown whispering, her breath visible, her heart steady. On mantle, beads waited like patience, glowing faint amber, remembering prayers shared. She lifted them, warmed them gently, and smiled inwardly. "Peace," she whispered, as greeting, farewell, and blessing combined. Outside, bells tolled, muffled by snow, their sound tender, like forgiveness embodied. The world had not changed violently, only softened, widened, exhaled in relief. A maid entered, carrying basin, quietly, eyes on floor, hands steady grace. "Majesty, breakfast waits," she murmured reverent, as if food could be prayer. Elizabeth nodded slowly, smile half-born. "Thank you, child," she said, honest. The girl curtsied, departed silently, leaving air warmer. Elizabeth lingered, looked once more through frosted glass to snow below. Tracks appeared faint, servants' footprints weaving, messengers departing, sparrows testing crumbs. Life continued humbly, refusing despair, offering itself again, unafraid of memory. She turned inward, toward fire's glow, where coals whispered, "Morning forgives night." A log cracked softly, like laughter aged, like faith restored. Elizabeth drew shawl, sat beside hearth, and closed eyes. Within her stillness, Mary's presence faded, not as vanishing, as rest granted. The two queens, so different, tethered, now shared peace beyond parchment, beyond time. "Cousin," Elizabeth thought, "may warmth find you, where snow never needs to fall." The two queens, so different, tethered, now shared peace, beyond parchment, beyond time. "Cousin," Elizabeth thought, "may warmth find you, where snow never needs to fall." She imagined fields, not of England nor of France, but something gentler, light without shadow, wind without edge, forgiveness without ending. She breathed deeply, let shoulders ease, felt years loosen, like thawing ground. The world outside brightened gradually, reverent, as if learning from her example. Somewhere below stairs, music began quietly. A lute testing, then resolving softly. The melody simple, built from kindness, built from air. It filled corridor, climbed staircase tenderly, found her chamber, found her listening. She smiled faintly, half in memory, half in blessing. The song lingered, like incense folding, like peace realized. The maid returned, set down bread, poured warm milk, smiled with eyes. "Would you like the shutters opened?" she asked softly. "Yes," said Elizabeth. "Let light speak." The maid obeyed. Sun entered gently. It brushed portraits, touched tapestries kindly, kissed old dust, anointed the morning. Every corner glowed, every color forgiven, every silence blessed. Elizabeth took bread, broke it slowly, shared it inwardly with memory, mercy. The bite plain, the taste good, the act prayer. She thought briefly of council chambers, awaiting instruction still, but did not hurry. Peace does not hurry. A page entered, bowed low, earnest. "Majesty," word came from Fotheringhay. Elizabeth's eyes softened, not in dread, but in acceptance. She gestured him. "Tell me gently." He swallowed once, then spoke quietly. "It is over, Majesty. She rests." The room stilled, time folded inward. The fire dimmed, bowing in reverence. The snow outside shone whiter, purer. Elizabeth closed eyes, hands on beads, fingers unmoving, heart unmended yet. "God receive her," she whispered slowly, as breath became benediction itself. No tears fell. They had before, when they mattered. Now only stillness and quiet honor. "Forgive the world," she breathed again, and the air answered kindly. Outside, the people continued their day, children laughing distant, men mending nets. The Thames glittered faintly, unfreezing at edges, moving forward, gently, as time must. Elizabeth stood once, crossed to window, looked toward north, toward unseen Fotheringhay. Snow reflected sunlight, bright yet merciful, like peace granted too late, finally. She pressed palm to window's frost, left a warmth in glass shape, a mark fleeting yet tender proof that mercy lingered. Then she turned, walked to table, opened her journal and wrote slowly, "February, quiet day, snow-covered England, one life ended, another forgiven." She signed initials, closed the page, and exhaled gently. No trumpet sounded, no hymn required. Only stillness answered. Maybe that's how the world heals, not by thunder, but by softness. The Queen remained, watching sunlight shift, watching mercy stay. Servants whispered news, bells marked hour, and history recorded, carefully, solemnly. But in her room, for a moment, all was balanced, all was still. The candle flickered, then straightened proudly, its flame unbroken, its light forgiving. Elizabeth smiled faintly, rose once more and whispered gently as to the world. Peace, at last. Outside, the snow continued falling softly, not as mourning, but as grace.